History presents itself as a sequence of isolated civilizations rising and falling through chance, innovation, and failure, yet when examined closely, a far more troubling pattern emerges. Across continents and millennia, cultures with no official connection develop the same hierarchies of power, the same symbols of authority, the same systems of obedience, and the same division between rulers and ruled. From ancient Sumer to Egypt, from Rome to the Maya, from feudal empires to modern global structures, the architecture of control remain remarkably consistent. Names change, gods change, technologies change, but the underlying design does not. This chapter begins with the unsettling proposition that civilizations do not collapse and reset naturally, they are replaced, while something older and unseen survives every transition. At the heart of this pattern is hierarchy. Every empire organizes itself into layers where knowledge, privilege, and decision-making flow downward from a small elite. The masses are taught stories that justify this arrangement, whether through divine right, destiny, progress, or security. What is rarely questioned is why this structure appears everywhere, regardless of geography or culture. Coincidence becomes an increasingly weak explanation. When the same blueprint repeats across thousands of years, it suggests inheritance rather than invention. Something is being passed forward through time, quietly and deliberately. Ancient symbols reinforce this continuity. Serpents, eyes, suns, pyramids, obelisks, and winged beings appear again and again in civilizations officially separated by oceans and centuries. These symbols are dismissed as archetypes or artistic coincidence, yet they consistently appear at the centers of power, temples, thrones, priesthoods, and royal bloodlines. Symbols are not decoration, they are a language, and like any language, they communicate meaning to those who know how to read them. The masses see myth, the initiates see instruction. Power also repeats its methods. Fear is always central. Whether fear of gods, fear of exile, fear of invasion, fear of punishment, or fear of chaos, control relies on emotional compliance long before physical enforcement is required. People obey not because they are constantly threatened, but because disobedience feels dangerous on a psychological level. This emotional architecture appears ancient, refined, and deeply embedded in human societies. It did not emerge spontaneously in every culture. It was taught, adapted, and preserved. According to the long-standing analysis of David Icke, what survives each fallen civilization is not buildings or kings, but a hidden system of knowledge and control that simply changes its outer form. When an empire collapses, the visible structure falls, but the unseen architects relocate, rebrand, and rebuild. This explains why revolutions replace rulers, but not systems. Why oppression wears new faces while maintaining familiar mechanics, and why humanity feels trapped in a cycle it cannot escape. The most disturbing realization is that history itself may be the greatest illusion. By fragmenting the past into disconnected eras, the continuous pattern is concealed. People are taught to study civilizations in isolation, never as part of an ongoing design. Once the pattern is seen, however, it becomes impossible to unsee. Civilization stops looking like progress and starts looking like repetition. And repetition implies intention. This chapter does not claim to reveal the full nature of the hidden power. It does something far more dangerous. It establishes that the pattern exists. Because the moment that continuity is recognized, history is no longer a story of human failure alone. It becomes evidence of something ancient that refuses to die. From the earliest civilizations, power was never maintained through force alone. It was preserved through selective knowledge. Ancient societies were rigidly divided not just by wealth or status, but by access to understanding. Priesthoods, mystery schools, royal advisors, and initiated elites possessed knowledge deliberately withheld from the wider population. This knowledge was not merely spiritual or philosophical, it concerned the nature of reality, human consciousness, and the psychological mechanisms that shape belief. The masses were given myths, rituals, and moral codes, while the inner circles were given interpretation. This separation was not accidental, it was the foundation of long-term control. Sacred texts were written in symbolic language, not to enlighten everyone, but to conceal meaning in plain sight. Allegory replaced direct explanation. Symbols replaced clarity. Only those trained to decode them could access the deeper message. This ensured that power remained hereditary, guarded, and self-perpetuating. Knowledge was not shared because shared knowledge dissolves hierarchy. Instead, ignorance was framed as faith, obedience was framed as virtue, and questioning was framed as danger. This psychological conditioning created a population that policed itself, protecting the authority it did not understand. Education, as it existed in ancient times, was never universal. It was selective by design. Those deemed unworthy or unnecessary were taught only enough to function within the system, never enough to challenge it. This structure persists today, though its appearance has changed. Information is abundant, yet understanding is rare. People are flooded with data, but starved of context. The illusion of access replaces genuine insight. When everyone feels informed, few feel compelled to look deeper. This is the modern evolution of an ancient strategy. Initiation rites reveal another layer of control. Advancement was not based on moral growth or collective benefit, but on loyalty, secrecy, and psychological compliance. To ascend, one had to demonstrate obedience to the system and silence toward outsiders. Knowledge became currency, exchanged only among those who proved they would not disrupt the hierarchy. This ensured that even those who knew more would never reveal everything. Silence became survival. According to the long-expressed perspective of David Icke, this division of knowledge explains why humanity has repeatedly failed to break free from control, despite moments of apparent progress. Revolutions overthrow rulers, but the deeper understanding of how perception is managed remains hidden. The masses fight symptoms while the cause remains untouched. Without access to foundational knowledge, every new system eventually recreates the old one. The most disturbing aspect of this hidden knowledge is not what it reveals, but what it withholds. Humans were never meant to see themselves as powerful, conscious beings capable of independent perception. They were trained to see themselves as subjects, sinners, workers, consumers, or citizens, never as sovereign awareness. Knowledge that empowered self-understanding was labeled forbidden, heretical, or dangerous. Throughout history, those who attempted to share it were silenced, ridiculed, or destroyed. This chapter exposes a harsh truth. Ignorance is not a failure of humanity, but a condition imposed upon it. The hidden knowledge was never lost. It was guarded. And as long as understanding remains divided, control remains inevitable. The question is no longer whether this system existed, but whether it still does. Authority did not emerge naturally from human cooperation. It was constructed through belief, ritual, and fear. In the ancient world, power was not justified through law or democracy, but through divinity. Rulers did not govern because they were chosen by people, but because they were said to be chosen by gods. This distinction was crucial. A king could be questioned, a god could not. By merging rulership with the divine, authority was removed from human accountability and placed beyond challenge. Obedience became sacred, and resistance became heresy. This was the birth of psychological control on a civilizational scale. Across ancient cultures, the pattern is unmistakable. Pharaohs were living gods. Emperors ruled by heavenly mandate. Kings claimed divine bloodlines. Priests served as intermediaries between the unseen and the masses, interpreting the will of gods that no one else could hear. This structure ensured total dominance, not through constant violence, but through belief. People obeyed because they believed disobedience would bring divine punishment, cosmic imbalance, or eternal suffering. Control extended beyond life itself and into the afterlife, making it absolute. This system was not designed to enlighten humanity, but to stabilize hierarchy. Gods were not distant spiritual ideals, they were tools of governance. Myths encoded obedience. Rituals reinforced submission. Moral codes were framed as universal truth while conveniently aligning with elite interests. Authority became self-validating. Rulers claimed divine right, priests validated rulers, and the population internalized both. The system fed itself. As civilizations evolved, the language changed, but the structure survived. Divine kingship gradually transformed into chosen leaders, appointed officials, and expert authorities. The gods faded, but reverence remained. Modern systems insist they are rational and secular, yet they still demand unquestioned trust in institutions, experts, and invisible decision makers. The sacred robes were replaced with suits, titles, and credentials. The psychological architecture, however, remained intact. According to the long-standing analysis of David Icke, authority is most effective when it is invisible as manipulation and visible as necessity. People are trained from childhood to defer, comply, and seek permission. Authority becomes synonymous with order, safety, and morality. To challenge it is framed as dangerous, irresponsible, or extremist. This framing ensures that even unjust systems are defended by those they oppress. What makes this engineered authority so powerful is its internalization. Over time, external rulers become internal voices. People police their own behavior, suppress forbidden thoughts, and censor their own questions. Authority no longer needs to impose itself, it lives within the mind. The ancient gods may be gone, but the fear of disobedience remains deeply embedded in human psychology. This chapter reveals a critical realization. Authority is not a natural law of human existence. It is a constructed belief system, refined over thousands of years. Once authority is seen as a psychological invention, rather than a divine or moral absolute, its spell weakens. Power loses its mystique. Control loses its inevitability. The birth of authority was humanity's greatest turning point, not because it created order, but because it taught people to surrender their own perception. And once perception is surrendered, control no longer needs chains. History, as it is officially taught, is not a record of the past, but a carefully curated narrative of acceptable memory. Entire eras are reduced to footnotes, dismissed as myth, or removed entirely when they challenge the established timeline of human development. Advanced ancient engineering, sophisticated astronomical knowledge, global cultural similarities, and unexplained technological precision are treated as anomalies rather than evidence. The implication is clear: humanity was primitive, ignorant, and helpless until modern civilization arrived to enlighten it. This story is comforting to authority because it frames control as progress and hierarchy as necessity. Yet the physical evidence refuses to comply. Megalithic structures carved with precision that rivals modern machinery. Astronomical alignments accurate to cycles spanning thousands of years. Mathematical knowledge embedded in stone long before it was supposedly discovered. These are not isolated curiosities. They appear across the world, disconnected by geography, but united by technique and understanding. To accept the official explanation, one must believe that ancient humans independently developed the same advanced knowledge, then collectively forgot it. Amnesia on a global scale is presented as coincidence. The deeper issue is not what is missing, but why it is missing. When evidence challenges the narrative of linear progress, it is sidelined. When discoveries suggest that humanity once understood reality differently, they are ridiculed. Myth becomes a convenient label for inconvenient truths. By framing ancient knowledge as fantasy, authority ensures it is never taken seriously. This strategy protects the modern hierarchy by reinforcing the belief that humanity has always needed guidance, rulers, and systems to survive. According to the long-standing analysis of David Icke, history has been weaponized to enforce psychological limitation. If people believe their ancestors were incapable of advanced understanding, they are less likely to question current authority or imagine alternative ways of organizing society. The past becomes a warning rather than a resource. Progress becomes synonymous with obedience to modern systems rather than rediscovery of lost awareness. Another layer of erasure lies in the destruction of records. Libraries burned, texts banned, knowledge restricted to elite circles. Each act of suppression is later justified as necessity, ignorance, or accident. But repetition reveals intention. Knowledge that empowers independent thought has always been dangerous to centralized control. The loss of ancient understanding was not simply tragic, it was strategic. This erasure also fragments human identity. When people are disconnected from their true past, they lose continuity. They see themselves as isolated individuals rather than part of a long manipulated story. Without historical context, patterns cannot be recognized. Each generation is forced to relearn the same lessons while the deeper structure remains untouched. Control thrives in this loop. What emerges from this chapter is a disturbing realization. History was not merely forgotten, it was edited. The erased chapters were not insignificant, they were foundational. They spoke of human potential, consciousness, and alternative ways of perceiving reality that threatened hierarchical power. By removing them, authority ensured that humanity would look forward for salvation rather than backward for truth. The past is not dead, it has been buried. And buried things, when uncovered, have a way of destabilizing everything built on top of them. The greatest illusion of the modern world is that ancient systems of control collapsed with empires, temples, and divine kings, when in reality they simply changed appearance. Power did not disappear, it refined itself. Where ancient authority relied on gods and bloodlines, modern authority relies on institutions, systems, and abstraction. Control no longer needs to announce itself as sacred because it has normalized itself as practical, necessary, and inevitable. The temples became financial centers. The priesthood became experts and technocrats. The rituals became procedures, policies, and protocols. The structure, however, remained unchanged. Modern power operates through complexity. Systems are designed to be so vast and interconnected that no single individual feels responsible and no single population feels capable of resistance. Responsibility is diluted across bureaucracies, corporations, and invisible decision makers. This creates the illusion that no one is in control, while ensuring that control is absolute. People obey not because they fear punishment, but because the system feels too large to challenge and too essential to abandon. This is the modern evolution of divine authority, an invisible force that governs life while claiming neutrality. Symbols resurface in plain sight. Ancient emblems once carved into stone now appear in corporate logos, government architecture, and ceremonial spaces. These are not artistic coincidences. Symbols carry meaning across time, signaling continuity to those who understand their language. While the public sees branding, the initiated recognize inheritance. Power remembers itself even when populations forget. According to the long-standing analysis of David Icke, the modern world is not controlled primarily through law or violence, but through perception management. Media does not inform, it frames. Education does not liberate, it conditions. Economics does not serve humanity, it disciplines it. Scarcity is engineered, not natural. Fear is manufactured, not accidental. Through these mechanisms, people are guided into behaviors that sustain the system while believing they are acting freely. What makes this phase of control particularly effective is participation. People are not forced into the system. They are incentivized to depend on it. Identity becomes tied to productivity, consumption, and compliance. Survival becomes conditional. Those who question are not imprisoned en masse. They are marginalized, discredited, or economically excluded. Control becomes social rather than overt, enforced by peers rather than rulers. The population becomes both the prisoner and the guard. Technology accelerates this process. Data replaces intuition, metrics replace meaning, algorithms predict behavior before individuals recognize it themselves. This predictive capacity allows power to guide outcomes without direct intervention. When behavior is anticipated and nudged, free will becomes a managed illusion. The system does not need to control everyone, only enough to shape the environment in which choices are made. The most disturbing realization of this chapter is that modern humanity lives under an ancient system perfected by time. The same power that once demanded obedience through gods now demands compliance through survival, identity, and fear of exclusion. The masks are modern, but the face beneath them is ancient. This chapter exposes the uncomfortable truth. Humanity did not escape ancient control, it inherited it. And until the continuity is recognized, the cycle will repeat indefinitely, each era believing itself free while unknowingly reenacting the same design. The truth was never buried because it was false. It was buried because it was dangerous. Knowledge that reveals how power truly operates threatens every hierarchy built on obedience, fear, and managed perception. If humanity understood that control did not originate in modern politics but in ancient psychological architecture, the spell of inevitability would break. People would no longer see oppression as normal or authority as sacred. They would recognize patterns instead of reacting to events. This is why the deepest truths were removed from history, fragmented into myth, and dismissed as conspiracy. A population that cannot recognize continuity cannot challenge it. Throughout time, those who attempted to expose this continuity were silenced, ridiculed, or erased. Their ideas survived only in distorted fragments, hidden within symbols, allegories, and forbidden texts. This ensured that the knowledge remained accessible only to those trained to decode it, while the wider population was taught to mock or fear it. Ridicule proved more effective than censorship. A truth laughed at is a truth neutralized. By framing awareness as madness, danger, or ignorance, the system ensured its own protection. According to the long-standing analysis of David Icke, the resurfacing of this truth is not accidental. It is the result of cumulative contradiction. The system has reached a level of control that requires constant exposure. Surveillance expands while privacy rhetoric collapses. Freedom is celebrated while choice narrows. Trust is demanded while integrity dissolves. These contradictions cannot be reconciled indefinitely. They produce cognitive dissonance, and dissonance leads to questioning. The system is revealing itself by necessity. Technology, once a perfect tool of control, has become a double-edged sword. While it enables monitoring and behavioral prediction, it also allows patterns to be shared, compared, and recognized. People across cultures are noticing the same mechanisms at work, the same emotional manipulation, the same narrative cycles. Recognition spreads quietly, not through mass awakening events, but through personal realization. Awareness does not announce itself. It grows silently. Another reason the truth is resurfacing is exhaustion. Maintaining illusion requires energy, emotional, psychological, and social. As crises multiply, fear loses its potency. People stop reacting with belief and start reacting with skepticism. Compliance becomes habitual rather than heartfelt. When belief fades, control weakens. This is not rebellion, it is withdrawal of psychological consent. The buried truth also reemerges because consciousness evolves despite suppression. Human awareness cannot be permanently confined to limited perception. Intuition persists beneath conditioning. Curiosity survives beneath fear. The system can distract, but it cannot extinguish the fundamental drive to understand. Eventually, awareness outgrows containment. The final realization of this chapter is unsettling yet empowering. The hidden power never ruled humanity by force alone. It ruled by shaping perception and limiting awareness. And perception can change. Once people see the pattern ancient, continuous, adaptive, the illusion of inevitability collapses. Control loses its mystique. Authority loses its sanctity. This is why the truth was buried, and this is why it is returning now, not because the system has failed, but because humanity is beginning to recognize it. And recognition, once achieved, cannot be undone.